Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super Fantify. This make a show talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm gonna talk about La Brea Season 3, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Ty's circumstances. Obviously, he doesn't even know where to begin with all of this. It's like, right, I'm a couple weeks before the La Brea sinkhole and everything, but I just don't know what to do about it. He actually talks to someone at the place he's staying, like one of the workers there, and she kind of gave him a different perspective on it. It's like, right, rather than kind of going at it alone, find a friend or somebody that can help you do it. But he just didn't know who to turn to. I thought it was interesting, out of anyone you would turn to, why would you turn to Sam first? Because I jumping ahead, he ultimately goes to Gavin, but I thought it was interesting. Like, Gavin would have been one of my first choices, but even he wouldn't have been able. I mean, to be fair, this is around the time Gavin was not in the best shape. He ends up being someone they have to turn to regardless because they need his help, but in the long run, he isn't in the best shape right now for you to want to go to him out of anybody. But what I thought was interesting that the one person he ended up turning to would be Sam. Would have never saw that coming. To be fair, it's funny too because when they were in the past, who was it that Riley and Josh ran into? Was her dad. So, well, didn't they run into like a younger version of her dad in like the 80s? I believe they did, if I remember correctly. So, it feels so interesting that Sam ends up being that. Maybe they also did that for a particular reason, that he ends up being this pass through line that kind of connects in some capacities. Because I don't know, I just think that's so interesting. I guess it's like he's the one that you could because Ty says like you're the person I trust the most. I was like, wow, that's kind of a shot against anyone else. But I guess it's like in retrospect, to be fair, like the people Ty's gotten closest to would be Eve and Sam, but obviously Eve's not there. Probably be a little harder to kind of bring that up and broach that present day with present day Eve. But I guess maybe he knows enough about Sam to know, like, okay, I can say this, and this that will prove to him I'm from the future. So visited him, gave some information like this is all going to happen, transpire in the next couple hours. You hit me up when you find out I'm speaking the truth. It tries to explain it to Sam, but Sam doesn't want to believe him, which I think is so beautifully done. How that parallels Sam in 10,000 BC, who had a conversation about himself with Gavin, where he's like, "Yeah, I'm a different person now that I was before." I mean, a lot of people have changed drastically upon coming to down here. I mean, even if it's not like the biggest change in some people, it's more like they become better people all around. And for him, it's like Sam was very stubborn. He didn't want to listen to anything when it came outside of his worldview. It's just kind of like, hey, this is how I see things, and no one's going to change my mind about it. So I think literally the moment he's having that conversation with Gavin, we cut to him not believing Ty in present day. So I think that's interesting how that works out. But I love how that was like meant to be that beautiful parallel. But Ty did give him enough information that did, despite his disbelief, ultimately Sam did check out. Like, oh yeah, Riley denied it, but eventually admitted she dropped out of med school. So I was like, wow, you are a lot. All right. So he ended up looking into Maya for him and noting that she's part of some, was it quantum mechanic type of stuff, which I'm like, obviously I immediately was like, okay, so it is in fact some kind of time travel program or something that the government is working on. Once again, I don't know if that's necessary. You'd assume like on some military front, once again, it'd have to have some warfare applications, or it could be used to protect the country in a more battle orientated manner. Just probably just don't know how they'd fully utilize it yet. But I mean, you'd be able to change the course of a lot of stuff. You'd be able to undo, hey, this military operation didn't go the way you wanted to. Now you have future knowledge to be like, hey, let's change it so that it does. I can see like it potentially being applied in strategic means like that. But either way, ultimately there's not enough about the program, so they need to talk to someone. So they go and bail Gavin out of prison. So I was like, yeah, that's going to be an interesting conversation to have. I mean, Ty does know enough to be like, hey, those visions you're having, I have the answers to them. I'm going to sound like a crazy man, but I have an explanation for it. I'm going to tell you the truth, and this is going to help you get back to your wife. I mean, especially considering the circumstances of back in 2000 BC, Eve is gone and they don't know where she is. And once again, how this all transpires, I brought this up last episode of, is how much is Ty going to change? Because now it's like, now you have entered this area where Sam is now knowing all this stuff. So then we kind of get into that Ouroboros of it all. Like you had to go to the past so that you can come back to the present day to stop the past stuff from ever happening. Because it's like, what does this mean for Sam? Because I guess now the argument is, well, we're not on the same timeline anymore. We're on timeline B now because Ty has changed things so much that it, like, whatever memory Sam is building now won't transpire to Sam in 10,000 BC. That's only if everything plays out exactly the same and he still ends up in 10,000 BC. Then it kind of changes things. But then it would be like, it would change so much because basically we'd go back to season 1, but things would be different. Like I said, it's going to be so interesting to ultimately see how the show handles it. Because something I didn't even think about, I was like, oh, it's kind of a truncated, like, final season. But I was like, I had to remind myself, like, another time travel NBC show that had a short ending was Timeless, because they got canceled a second time, and they ended up finishing it up with, like, a 2-hour movie. At least this is getting essentially kind of almost the same treatment. At least it's getting, like, an extra hour. I mean, God, I said 3 hours. I meant like 6 hours. But, adjusting, it's probably more like 4.5 hours if you, like, take out commercials and stuff like that. Yada, yada. You get the point I was making. I don't know why I said 3. I meant 6. Either way, tangents and all that aside. That's, like I said, it just gets my brain thinking in overdrive. It's just like, how are the ripple effects of this going to play out? Once again, I love me some butterfly effects of, like, time travel and stuff and just how different things are. Because I'm just so curious to see which route they take with the resolution for this. So we'll ultimately have to wait to see. We're pretty early on in the season, still 4 more episodes for some twists and turns and developments. But back in 10,000 BC, they are trying. Well, really quickly, before I was about to shift over to, like, the Paras Village and the Sky People kind of having beef and issue, which obviously, like, them being referred to as Sky People. Maybe they were referred to that as, like, season 1 and season 2. I don't remember. Because when I hear Sky People, I immediately think of, like, the 100. Obviously, there are parallels in a lot of ways. But either way, the thing that I was about to go down that route about the village and stuff like that. But first, I do want to talk about Gavin and Sam, which I thought that's also a beautiful parallel too. I brought up Sam and Gavin earlier about them kind of bonding and Sam's conversation about himself, just as we have past Sam talking to Ty. Gavin and Sam weren't seeing eye to eye because, right, Sam's freaked out. He's worried about his daughter, so he wants to go back to where that Aurora was, but Gavin's telling him, like, hey, just wait. If you do that, you're just going to end up, like, wasting your time. That Aurora's going, it's not coming back. But if we can find Maya, then maybe she could give us answers to figuring this whole thing out. But for Sam, it's just like he needs something. He can't just sit around. He needs to, well, he's going to be sitting around regardless at that Aurora, but he feels like that's going to be a better amount. He's going to be spending his time better that way than any other way. But either way, and so it's just interesting that they kind of butted heads, but they ultimately come together throughout the episode at the very end. And then also at the very end of the episode in 2021, we have them coming together, so it's just these very interesting parallels happening simultaneously. Just that continued conversation, which I thought was so interesting. But either way, going back to focus on what I was bringing up before, acclimating for the Sky People, everyone from the clearing acclimating in the village. Because, yeah, we've been cooperative before, but fully harmonizing together in the same place hasn't been a thing. We've had our spot, they've had theirs, but now having to acclimate. There's people like Judah who's complaining, because Pardo's away right now, so the person in charge is Ruth, which she kind of rules things with the iron fist, his perspective, but it's like, yeah, he's not the only one complaining. Other people are as well. So, and you have Lucas trying his best to try and handle all that, but then, like, a murder happens, and then, like, oh, it looks like this guy fell from far up. Interesting timing too, because obviously if you've seen this latest season of Reacher, that's how a few people get murdered. It's like, oh, you get dropped from a helicopter, and I'm like, well, there's a whole bunch of helicopters around, so I'm like, did they kidnap people? And I'm like, they would have noticed a giant helicopter in the sky, but it's like, no. What ended up being the case was, as we ultimately find it, come like, oh, you're falling from a great height. That's when immediately go like, helicopter. But I'm like, no, you would have noticed that. The things are fast, but they make a whole bunch of noise. People would have noticed. So I was like, interesting. So now Ruth is kind of wondering, hey, like, why are you letting Sam, one of the Sky people, examine one of our people? So it kind of draws that division even further, a little untrustworthiness on both sides. I mean, hell, even Scott tells Veronica this story of like, oh yeah, like she apparently murdered her husband and stuff like that. But I'm wondering, like, who did, like, was the person who said that to Scott, is that true, or is that someone just like fucking with Scott, trying to like scare, like, oh, let me scare some of these Sky people into obedience or whatever, or is there truth to that, you know? I mean, we met Potter's ex-husband, and we saw how that situation played out. I mean, granted, that was like, but still, like, not unless her circumstances are kind of similar. We don't know enough. Because Ruth does seem like she's a hard ass, but at the same time, it's like, right, I'm trying to keep the peace here. I'm doing the best that I can because I'm trying to look after my people, because we're all about community. Where you and your people, you're all about individuality. You're only looking out for your individual selves. You're not looking after each other as a whole. And it's like, well, we've accomplished that to some extent, but if we've seen over the course of the show, there is a lot of like, yeah, a lot of people kind of going after their self-interest, kind of screw everyone else's. That has kind of come up from time to time, especially when you think about, like, it's the thing of, oh, a lot of our main characters are looking out for everyone, but really they're kind of also doing their own thing. So there's something that can be said in the grand scheme of things, but when a second murder happens, it ends up revealing the truth that, oh yeah, it's freaking pterodactyls that are behind this. Which I even love Scott being like, man, I love pterodactyls. I can't believe they were once my favorite dinosaur. I'm so curious, what are most people's favorite dinosaurs? You'd assume T-Rex, because to me the T-Rex was always the coolest. But like, I don't know. I would assume because of Jurassic Park, maybe Velociraptors became a lot of people's one. I don't know. I've never gravitated necessarily to like the pterodactyl. It just seems so weird for the pterodactyl to be someone's favorite, but I'm sure it's a lot more people's favorite than I assume. Obviously, all this dinosaur talk, the first thing that immediately comes across my mind is thinking like, talking about all these dinosaurs makes me immediately think of Land Before Time, which I haven't thought about that in a hot minute. But obviously, these pterodactyl attacks happened at the worst time, because they ended up being this thing that kind of further divided both groups. Gavin and Sam got locked up because Sam got into a brawl because he was desperate to get to that Aurora, but Ruth has shut the place down and was like, no one's going anywhere. Sam like got into a scuffle. Gavin intervened, and which is ironic too and interesting too, because if you look at where they pick up Gavin in 2021 at the police station, it looks like he's got black eye, so he most likely got in a bar fight. Once again, interesting parallels that can't be by accident, and it has to be parallels they 100% did on purpose, which I think is kind of interesting. But they got locked up. You have Izzy kind of going through stuff right now. Her mom's gone, her brother's gone, she doesn't know if she's going to see them again. Now her dad's locked up. There's not a lot, like, she's okay with a lot of people here, but obviously her family's been the people she's gravitated to the most and spent the most time with, and so it ends up being a thing of the people she can rely on the most. When she's lost and angry, she had her family to talk to before, and now she kind of has no one, and that just makes her even angrier. I mean, the circumstances she's in right now, your mom being gone, your brother being gone, is going to make you feel helpless, it's going to make you feel angry, and that's just bottling up more and more. And the interesting parallel of Ruth's daughter being the person that she butts heads with this episode, just as both sides are kind of butting heads with each other. And it's more so, yes, the villagers kind of have issues with the Sky people, but like Ruth's a personification of that, and especially when Lucas is trying to do the leadership thing. He's trying to be respectful. He's trying to have Ruth see them eye to eye, like, we could cooperate together, we're trying to learn, but it ends with them kind of getting locked up because Ruth, that's her way of controlling the situation, kind of out of sight, out of mind. We're going to run things our way, and you need to be out of our way until we figure this whole out, the whole pterodactyl crisis out. And while you're out of the way, we'll ultimately, you can either stay and go in the longhouse like we want you to, or you can just leave the village in general. But they have nowhere else to go because the clearing has become a little gathering for dinosaurs. So there's no going back in that department and finding somewhere and starting from scratch is not going to be the easiest thing to do. So they kind of are limited in their choices. In fact, I'm sure Lucas is the one that told him, like, okay, let's actually do this, because we have really nowhere else to go. And so, and obviously you have Judah there, like, questioning Lucas's decisions. It's like because Judah's like, oh, talking to other people, like, we should fight back. Veronica slapping him, like, don't be an idiot, we need to, like, once again, Judah's the one that was running his mouth last episode, being like, oh yeah, you're leading us, you were a drug dealing. He was like, yes, Judah, I was a drug dealer. It's Judah just, like, he just gets more and more screen time just so we can, like, have him to be, like, the one who bitches and complains. But obviously a major MVP in all of this ended up being Scott. Scott always has a tendency of coming through. In this particular case, he figured out why the pterodactyls are in this area. They're specifically using the area around the village as kind of a nesting ground. So they don't like people in their territory. So what Scott does, they go and find one of the spirals, because they were setting up one in the village, but that got disrupted before I think they could lay one of the eggs there. So the other egg that's there, they found it, dug it up, and went to set it up in a new spot, which ultimately works out in the end. And so they ended up relocating the pterodactyl. So it's like, oh, cool, we didn't have to choose violence 100% to resolve this situation. There is still that one pterodactyl that caught an arrow to the wing or whatever from Ruth's daughter when she was protecting Izzy and Scott and that little girl they were protecting. Because Ruth's daughter understands where Izzy's coming from, where it's just like, right, people not understanding you, I understand you. And so I'm like, oh, they're becoming friends. I was like, which almost kind of got me thinking too for a second. I was like, do we know what? Because immediately my brain went here. I'm like, because I was like, once again, like, Izzy doesn't really, there's not many people here her own age. The only people her own age was, like, Riley and Josh, and so there was no one else. So someone about your own age to kick it with and actually have an actual friend. Because Riley is kind of, you're friends, but, like, really it's like, that's kind of like a, yeah, we're friends because you're my brother's girlfriend type of, so everyone else is kind of an adult and kind of feeling like even more of an outsider. Having Ruth's daughter kind of feel the same way kind of makes you feel like you have this common ground with someone. But I was also thinking, like, do we know Izzy's sexual orientation? I'm like, I don't know if that's come up before. I was like, could that be something? Could it be like planting the seeds for something more on that part? Could just be friends, but I was wondering if there's going to be more in that department. But because I don't know if that's really come up yet about, like, her having a love interest or anything like that. Obviously, like, because the biggest thing set up was, like, well, figuring out the whole complicated love triangle between Eve, Levi, and Gavin. But then, like, Josh and Riley had their whole thing. But I don't think Izzy's had one right now. Because, I mean, her main focus has just been her family, right? So that hasn't really come up now. So that's why I'm wondering if their way of introducing a potential love interest. Kind of like, it's like, oh, we started off not liking each other, but then we become friends and potentially something more. We'll see. Maybe it is just pure friendship and I'm reading way too much into it. But I did kind of get like a twinge of an inkling of, like, could that be something? Could I be just, like, pairing people together for no reason? There's a good possibility, but we'll see where things kind of go on that front. She did say that she was going to teach Izzy, like, hey, if we survive this, I'll teach you actually how to shoot bow and arrows. And it's like, yeah, so just don't die out there. So luckily, they're both still alive by the end, so. Obviously, it's still a thing of everyone's gathered up, of the people from the village and the people from the clearing, each sitting at their own tables eating, but as Ruth kind of puts it, in the long run, it takes a while for them to kind of get used to other people and trusting. So, but it's a step in the right direction. Like, hey, we're all eating together, even if we are just sitting at separate tables with our own groups. But we ended up finding out that Ruth, her grandfather's from the 60s. He was actually was the first outsider to join this village. So she has a lot more in common with the Sky people. So maybe that's also why she had her reservations as well, because it's like, maybe that's also why she was willing to listen on some part, because, because she's been so integrated as part of this village. It's like she has such a disconnect from, where her grandfather came from, but it's still part of her roots. But I just thought that was interesting. But Gavin did get some advice from Sam about not, once again, Sam had said the whole thing about not listening. That was kind of his biggest regret. That was something he learned how to do more while he was here. because once again he took for granted the amount of time him and Riley had here in 10,000 BC. And it's like, to be fair, you found yourself in dangerous situations time and time again, but it's like, oh, kept putting off because she always wanted to go fishing for so long, and thought maybe here in 10,000 BC we'd finally get it done, but it's like kept putting it off just because you never really have any time. Because that was even something Izzy was getting at, where you used to be able to take time to talk to someone, but like, right, we're so busy surviving, we don't really have time for, hey, check-ins of, are you okay sometimes? Especially considering the group psychologist, Ty, is now in a different time period, so that doesn't help either. Because he out of anybody does a lot of the mental checkup on everything. Like, yo, you good? How's your mental health? But luckily, Gavin was able to kind of reach out to Izzy and was like, right, how about tomorrow we actually go for a walk and you kind of let me know what's on your mind? It's like, right, rather than trying to fix everything, just listen to your daughter, because you trying to fix everything is just going to make it more frustrating for her, because it's like, I don't need you to fix everything. I need you to hear me and see me and understand where I'm coming from. It's, everyone just wants to be understood and heard. And she just hadn't had an opportunity for anyone to really hear her, except for Ruth's daughter this episode. Her name, is it Lila? They said it once or twice, and I kept losing it in my head. I want to say it's like Lila or something, but yeah, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this takes us, because Gavin did get the tail number of the helicopter him, Lucas, and Scott found. So it's like, right, it's in a military base in LA, and if it's in LA present day, that means that's got to be where it's set up here in 10,000 BC. So he's like, I know where that base is. All I have to do is travel there. So it's their way of finding Maya, especially if she's already there. Because I'm assuming they need her daughter, because it's like maybe they found her and they need Petra to either, because I'm about to say, like, how would you draw her mom out? But it's like, it could just be a thing of they already have Maya. It's just a thing of, we need to force you to cooperate. You'll only cooperate if we have your daughter, and we'll use her as leverage to get what we need from you. So what that fully entails, what this military group is all about, what's going on present day, how that whole situation plays out and resolves, we'll ultimately have to wait to see. I'm also curious how much of Eve we're actually going to get this season, because like, we saw her from behind in episode 1, but I'm also curious, like, is she going to not be in like 90% of the season and then not pop up until like the very, very end? Because it could easily be that thing of, hey, she's gone for most of the season, but we get one episode, or maybe part of an episode covering everything she went through, and we get to see it, or maybe she just explains it. I don't know. To be fair, like I said, we're only in like, I was about to say we're still early on in the season, but once again, we're already like a third of the way through the season already. So it's going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.